If you didn't click this particular headline, I don't blame you. I actually scrolled past it first time. But, well, we did click on it. And it looks like it's a simple change, that Blizzard have just unlocked steady flight all over the place. But buried inside this otherwise unsuspecting blue post, Blizzard actually did something a bit unusual, and it's kind of exciting. They responded to a player movement. If you're wondering which, it is this one. Basically, in this video, we covered the no flying movement that's appeared in Midnight. It's one where players are choosing to stay grounded, and they are basically loving it. It's not a small group of people either. There is clearly a real hunger for exploring the world slowly, drinking it all in, and perhaps having an experience that feels a bit closer to when you were exploring Azeroth for the first time all those years ago. And it seems this has caught on so much that Blizzard have taken notice. Here's what Blizzard said and why it matters. They say they've seen great discussion about how Midnight hits different from a ground mount, and they say they agree, that it's fun to experience quests at a less frenetic pace and rewarding to engage with the world from the ground. Now, here's the big thing. Don't worry, they don't plan to restrict flight access. They confirm that. But their wording actually matters because they said they don't plan to restrict it, quote, meaningfully in the future. Now, of course, with flight, that cat is just out of the bag forever. But the word meaningfully is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I mean, they're definitely thinking about it, especially because they then ask for more thoughts and ideas in the forum thread, and they make a big point of highlighting that people's feedback does actually change the future of the game. Now, I'm not going to say that it's a full-on hidden message just in there revealing their plans, but there are a lot of words that betray exactly what kind of thing they're open to in the future. Things like the rest of their damn post. You see, the full story here is that they were on autopilot whenever they set up Flight Midnight. They locked steady flight behind Pathfinder as they usually do, but then they thought about it after launch and realized it just didn't make any sense. Now, in response to that, they could have just flipped the switch on and posted about it in, what, a line or two? But instead, we got this entire big post instead that talks about a hell of a lot more than just steady flight. So with this, we finally get to see how Blizzard truly feels about flying. And they use a targeted kill quest as an example, where without flying, you've got to fight your way through the enemy stronghold, there are fixed guards to kill, there are roaming patrols to watch out for. And here's where Blizzard's description really takes a turn. You're, quote, generally being heroic, right? That's what your character is doing when you're going to kill the bad guy in the bad guy's stronghold. And this is the sort of thing the classic hardcore people have absolutely loved. They say that you test and use more of your skills, and the quest has a more satisfying build-up and conclusion, and it matches the player's status as a hero. Now, honestly, I think all that stuff is bang on true. I mean, as fun as knocking out all your world content in one fell swoop by just zipping around the place like you are some sort of jump jet fighter with VTOL that's crazy and powerful, it doesn't really feel like you're, say, a dude in a fantasy world with a sword running around on a horse, which for many people is the original fantasy of World of Warcraft. So I don't think what Blizzard put down there is just a description. I think it is a little bit propagandistic, in that it's focused on the experience and the fantasy far more than the actions you take. I mean, reading that, you may even remember playing Classic or TBC, walking around ruins, spinning your camera, looking out for patrols, pulling mobs about 50 yards back into safe areas, and just feeling pure relief on the ride back to town with a bunch of quests to hand in. Back then, your class's toolkit truly mattered. The level design mattered. The enemies mattered. You overcame the odds and you felt like a hero. And that makes the next bit all the more damning. Blizzard says in their post that with flight, you bypass all the risks, you just drop down on your target's head, you kill them without any repercussions, and you just fly away. You basically drone strike them. It's way more efficient, but in Blizzard's words, quote, it reduces the challenge, removes elements of gameplay, and robs the player of much of the experience. I mean, you can almost taste the years of developer, maybe rage is too strong a word, but let's just use it. The developer rage packed into that sentence. Imagine spending years building levels with care and attention, only for many players to just ignore them completely because they're zooming over it. But again, this is a little bit of propaganda. It's not even remotely a fair comparison. It is basically just Blizzard putting into writing that flying has made questing specifically a worse experience. Though of course, questing is not the only experience that some people go to World of Warcraft for. And that is where the future can get interesting. So what are Blizzard going to do about all this? Why go to the bother of all those words if they're just going to do nothing? Well, at least immediately, they're going to do nothing. There will be nothing in Midnight or its patches. But The Last Titan is a bit of a different story. If Blizzard sticks to their 18-month schedule, The Last Titan will release around August 2027, which really isn't that far away. Now that means Blizzard are working on the early stages of that expansion right now. They are in production for those zones. They are building out that whole world. And that makes it the perfect time to start the flying conversation internally. I think clearly they want ideas. Now the obvious one is opt-in. Let people disable their own flight at the start of a campaign, maybe give them a title, and a transmog if they finish it whilst grounded. But that doesn't solve the real problem. You see, Blizzard's post paints this picture of storming an enemy camp slowly, heroically, methodically. But they very carefully ignore that actually doing that in the game looks like this, where you just run in and slaughter everything. You AoE all of it down in seconds. Even on a ground mount, that heroic gameplay doesn't really exist in WoW's world right now. People are just too strong for the world to be a threat. So, a cosmetic reward for staying grounded would be nice, but it does not bring back the experience Blizzard are romanticizing. If only they had an answer to both problems at the same time, and if only it was an answer they've literally already prototyped and we've actually played for months. Heroic World Tier version 2. Here's how Blizzard can solve all these problems with one system. In Legion Remix, they tested Heroic World Tier, and in Heroic World Tier, mobs in the open world were scaled up, XP and rewards were also boosted up to match that. Now, certain mobs had affixes that you had to play carefully around. Some were buffed until you would CC them, some would just summon in extra demons, and some would buff others, meaning it would be a challenge to do a big pull. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was a fun experiment, and the result was basically proof that questing could still have teeth. Now, it was still a little bit busted, of course, because of flying. It would let you skip a lot of the combat of Heroic World Tier, which kinda took some of its teeth away. So here's an obvious solution. In The Last Titan, add Heroic World Tier from the very start. Disable flying while it's active, and bump all the rewards up. If you want an efficient speed leveling experience, just go play whatever way that you want, which could be the way you play the game right now. If you want a relaxing time, maybe play the game grounded on normal. But if you want that full questing experience, where it's challenging, where the design, the layout of the World of Warcraft actually matters, then pick Heroic World Tier. And combining these even saves Heroic World Tier itself. That's because the added time and challenge of staying grounded means they don't have to worry about outliers, like, as an example, objective-only quests that flying trivializes. Because if you could just turn on Heroic World Tier, but then fly straight to single mini-boss kill quests and knock out the whole map in no time, well, it wouldn't really be Heroic World Tier anymore. And Blizzard wouldn't even need to scale it that high either. That's because staying grounded adds natural challenge that is more interesting than just giant numbers and crazy affixes. And if you think about it, this combo could actually revive the experience that Blizzard's post just described. Patrols you need to avoid or CC instead of just fly past or AoE down. Caves and ruins that actually feel like they are spooky. Remember that from back in the day when you were new, when you were stupid, when you didn't have a metagame-pilled brain, and going into a cave in WoW actually felt like a bit of an adventure? A time when you were one body pull away from squeaky bum time. And the thing is, ground mount players have already reported that a lot of that old questing DNA still exists in WoW when you're not flying. The zones already support it. Plus, this limit would mean you couldn't cheese it by just having someone in the party flying around to do the objectives, though you might actually want to party up for the particularly hard quests, which may make WoW feel a bit more like an MMO. And then, if you're in World PvP, well, then you just have a whole phase of people who can't just fly to safety. You see, World PvP was basically killed by the Burning Crusade and flying. Just about everyone who played the game back then knows this simple fact, and we've never really got past it since. And Blizzard can make this worth your while. Flying makes things super efficient, so it could be the natural thing to do, but reward scaling in a harder phase could tip that balance back. Enough bonus XP that the campaign takes you, perhaps, all the way to max level instead of just hitting the level gates, as many people have. Maybe a unique recolor of the leveling gear, And perhaps even side quests and world quests could give you veteran crests at max level, or maybe even champion crests if the world tier was hard enough at endgame. It's never going to be as intense as hardcore, but it could scratch some of that itch. And with Blizzard's buffet philosophy, it slots into it just being another way to play that wouldn't be forced on people. You could ignore it if you'd rather fly, or if you liked old school WoW, you could live in that. And I see countless players talking about how leveling just doesn't make any sense anymore, how leveling just feels like a chore, how WoW is just completely endgame pilled right now. The likes of this could be a solution to that problem. Now, honestly, I'm not sure if Blizzard will go whole hog for this. It's true, a lot of ground mount enjoyers are there for the relaxing experience. A hard mode might not be right for them. But here's the thing that matters. Blizzard didn't write a patch note. They wrote some propaganda. Carefully worded, emotionally loaded propaganda for a version of WoW that has not existed in years. You don't write a blue post like that unless you're at least thinking about acting in some of these ideas. So whatever The Last Titan does with flying, the blue post tells you at least where the developers' hearts are. And after years of watching players skip over a meticulously crafted world, you can't blame them for wanting that world back. But there's one more thing Midnight proves, and it's that when WoW takes an expansion back to the older world, back to the zones and the lore that just feels core Warcraft, going back to Warcraft 3, going back to vanilla, going back to the Burning Crusade, and not just some random island that's been pulled out of a hat, well, maybe that's part of why people are actually caring about the world again. Maybe it's part of why people want to have that grounded experience. So whatever The Last Titan does with flying, it will do that in goddamn Northrend, a place that people love. And that blue post tells you where the developers' hearts are. After years of watching players skip their world, you can't blame them for wanting it back. And if you're the sort who wants more world content, I've got good news for you. Patch 12.05 has a lot of it, and you can find out all about it in this video next.